Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with Convery, where we explore stories, insights, and careers that inspire. In this special edition of Legacy in Motion Black History Month, I sit down with Paul Hamilton, a global talent executive, DE&I champion, and a leader in workforce transformation. With a career spanning top organizations like Microsoft, KPMG, LCBO, and BMO Financial Group, Paul has been at the forefront of talent acquisition, workforce planning, and leadership development. As a passionate advocate for DE&I, he has also dedicated his career to empowering underrepresented communities, shaping inclusive workplaces, and mentoring the next generation of leaders. So whether you're a young professional navigating that job market, a leader looking to build more inclusive teams, or someone just striving to create lasting impact, this conversation is for you. Paul, welcome to Coffee with Convery.
Brian, I'm so excited to be on this conversation with you today. I mean, I'm just a big fan of your coffee sessions. I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing and the impact that you're having in student life. So delighted to be a part of this discussion today.
Well, thank you. I'm even more delighted that you're here. So let's start maybe with some rapid fire questions. What do you consider your superpower?
It's funny you would say that. I was listening to a leader speak the other day, and the question was posed to this individual from a student. And the question was, how difficult is it for you as a Black person to work in professional services? And the response was, I use my Blackness as my superpower. And it really dawned on me that that too is my superpower. And
Yeah.
the reason why I say that, many years ago, I was sitting down with a leader, and the leader was like, it was actually my mentor. And they said, "Hey, you're doing really well. You're going to be a top executive in HR, but we got two problems with you." And the problem was, you're really big and you're really loud. So I need you to figure out how you make yourself smaller and maybe just lower your voice. And it really struggled with me, Brian,
Wow.
because what that person was saying was, you're Black. And in that moment, I realized that that is my superpower. And I need to harness that
Hmm.
and be proud of my size, my color, my tone, my voice, and not shy away. I need to lean into it. So it was in that precise moment that I
Mm,
realized this is my differentiator, because at the end of the day, there really is only one Paul Hamilton, and this is me. So I'm going to leverage that to my advantage. So that's my superpower. And I
I
use it to
love
this
it.
day. I use it to this day in the sense that I bring a different perspective on how to look at problems, how to solve problems. How do I collaborate with my peers? How do I look at situations from a completely different perspective based on my lived experience?
Exactly.
So that is my superpower. This person that you're seeing on the screen, and in all my Blackness, that's my superpower.
That is incredible. Thank you for sharing that story. Wow. Sometimes what they say, it's just they don't realize how that set you on a path to continue to be who you are, but it could also be very damaging to people, like sharing that kind of feedback. And
Brian, when
yeah,
I first heard that message, quite frankly, I went into the bathroom and I cried
yeah,
because I didn't know how
completely.
to process what was being said.
No,
And it wasn't until I went home and I sat down and I reflected on that and I realized the real message was X.
yeah,
And that changed the complexity of how I was going to respond. But in that moment, I actually went to the bathroom and I was troubled to the core,
I believe it.
because you're asking me to deny a part of who I am, what makes me me. So that was a really hard conversation. And as I mentioned, this person was an ally and this person was my mentor. So it wasn't meant to be malicious. It
Hmm.
wasn't meant to be damaging. But to your point, sometimes words can have such an adverse effect if you don't understand the implication it might have on the person you're speaking to.
150% on that one. Well, thank you for that. It really great to hear the learnings and lessons from that situation and how it was applied. And for others listening to this, it might be getting some of similar advice, like how do you turn that around for yourself? Favorite subject in school?
Oh, oh. Without a doubt, I love drama. I love
Ah,
the theater. And coupled with English, and
yeah.
I'm a big Shakespeare fan. And the
Very
reason for
cool.
that is the ability to, everything else was all facts, right? Everything else with math was facts, and you got your science, it's all driven in facts. But with drama, it's all about creativity. And it was all about something that we employ in today's world, and that is the ability to wear masks and change and transform and be a chameleon. We have to do that to a certain extent. But it was the ability to just recognize this is who I am. But for this next 30, 40 minutes, I'm actually going to be something else. I'm going to allow myself to just sort of step outside of my world and live in someone else's and fully appreciate the ability to see things differently. So, in one class, I'm going to be a tree. Well, what does a tree see? What does a tree feel? And it really was a first introduction around diversity. It was
Yeah,
about recognizing when you're in someone else's shoes, you see things differently, not right or wrong, just different. And you have to learn to appreciate the diverse perspectives and just the sort of different perspectives, different views
absolutely.
on how we see things. So theater was so important to me. English was so important. Shakespeare was so important because it really allowed me to see things from a highly simple but complex and elegant perspective.
Awesome. Thank you. We all start somewhere. What was your first job?
My first job was McDonald's. It
Okay.
was McDonald's, and I spent a few years there while I was in high school. And the beauty about McDonald's, and I can say this today, it was
Yeah.
one of the best training
I've
facilities.
I've heard that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what role you were in. They had
Yeah.
this concept called quality service and cleanliness, but it was really about how do you put the customer at the center of the experience, and how do you build everything around that customer experience, that customer journey. Well, here in the world of talent, that means how do you put the employee at the center of the experience? How do you put the candidate at the center of experience? And how do you build around that and create that ecosystem where they are front and center, and what they need drives the decisions and the products and the solutions that you build. So it was an unbelievable training
Yeah.
institute. It was a wonderful experience. But more importantly, there was things that were transferable from my McDonald's days that I still use today.
It's interesting because that's one of the things as you probably look at talent too, not because you're biased to McDonald's, but the training they put people through. I tell people all the time when they put those types of experiences on their resume, we look at that as a plus, right? You're getting customer service, you're getting trained, you're building fundamental skills that will carry you through the rest of your life, right? So here, a talent guy who's experienced that, talk about it, right? It's
Well, I
important.
understand the importance of really making sure the readiness factor is there, right? And that really
Absolutely.
comes with a solid training program that takes into consideration what they've already acquired in their past, but also meeting that person where they're at on their journey and building a training program that's going to allow them to be successful in the role. And it's not just a one size fits all approach. It really is customized to that individual, and it's ongoing, right? How do you ensure that, hey, Brian's in this role today? What is Brian going to need 6 months from now? What is Brian going to need 6 years from now? And how do we make sure that we keep Brian top of mind so that he feels that you have the tools that you need to be successful in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. If you had to articulate and pick one word to describe yourself, what would you use or pick, I guess?
You know, I would say curious.
Hmm.
Curious is a word that I think would define me. And I use today's world that we live in. I'm curious about everything that's happening from the micro in terms of what's happening here in our province, what's happening in our country, looking at the macro in terms of some of the geopolitical. There's a curiosity to understand why things are the way they are. And some people immediately jump to the sort of the obvious, the headlines. But that's not enough, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we have to go a layer deeper
yeah,
to really understand why people say the things that they say, why people do the things that they do, and then be able to comprehend, at a deeper level of understanding as to why the outcomes are the way they are. So I think curious has always been something that I've sort of gravitated to. I know right now that I know nothing. And because of that, there's this appetite to acquire as much knowledge as possible on on a particular subject, because that's going to help me in terms of feeding my curiosity, but having a real appreciation for different perspectives that we encounter on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. So I know you get this a lot in talent too, and I continue, and I think it's a big reason why I do this podcast as one of the starting questions is take us back. But you know what I mean? Because people always want to hear like, how did you get where you got and what did you do and how did you and did you take a straight narrow path or did you? So how did you get to where you are today?
So, Brian, I teach. I teach
Okay.
courses
Yeah.
in talent acquisition. I'm always asking people, so why are you in talent acquisition today? Because I have yet to receive an answer that says, when I was 3 years old, I wanted to be a recruiter or I wanted to be an
Yeah.
HR generalist. It doesn't happen that way. For me, I was working in financial services. I was working at in a securities firm, and I was really good at what I was doing. But what really made it special was I enjoyed the interaction. I enjoyed connecting with people. And someone said to me, "You are amazing at your ability to engage, ability to understand."
Hmm.
At that time, before it was a term, you were super empathetic, you're compassionate. Why don't you build a career around working with people? And that's when I learned this thing called recruiting. At first, it was like, oh, you should jump into HR. And I always assumed, well, no, 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 HR. You only talk about HR when you're getting fired, right? So, but they mentioned this other side of HR, which is talent acquisition or recruiting at that time, and understanding that you are helping someone build their career. And Brian, one of my first placements, I started off in the agency before I went to corporate. One of my
Okay.
first placements, I was working for this wonderful company. You may have heard of it, called HMV. And I was recruiting for their chief technology officer. And I ended up hiring this person by the name of Vlad, who he was overseas, and we brought him to Canada, and he took on the CTO role for HMV. I was in the agency space, so I was more concerned about making money. So, hey, Vlad, you're done. I'm moving on to the next. Vlad would call me on a regular basis, and I would sort of just ignore his phone call. And then one day I picked up the phone and I say, "Hey, Vlad, is everything okay?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I want to thank you." It's like, "Vlad, you already thanked me 3 or 4 times. Like, why are you thanking me?" He said, "You didn't just get me a job. You helped me because now I was able to get my wife and my daughter and bring them to Canada so they could have a full life. My daughter is now going to university in Canada. My wife, she doesn't have to fear for her life anymore."
Right.
And that changed the narrative around what recruitment was. It's not only about giving someone a job, and you know this, but it's also providing hope. It's
Yeah.
also providing a change that that person needs because maybe their mental health is being impacted by their current job, and it allows them to create some stability. But when I heard Vlad's voice and when he explained to me that this was more than just a job, it really made me understand the importance of what good talent acquisition folks do. It is about helping people. And I think everyone has this sort of altruistic need to want to do something positive. But when you can do so in the context of your role, where you can help someone escape a situation or give them hope or allow them to put food on the table for their family, that's when I realized this is where I want to spend the rest of my career.
It's an amazing story. And thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of young listeners here are also trying to break into HR. And I say that in air quotes because it's I've told them it's tough. There's not a lot of entry level jobs, even when you're going into it. And a lot of people take the recruitment path thinking they'll get into bigger and better things. And I'm like, you might just fall in love with it because of the very reason you just said, right? Like I'm similar in that space that I love this side of the machine for sure.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about Black History Month. I know we're celebrating achievements or reflections on progress, but we also are acknowledging the ongoing struggles for equality and justice. What for you does this month represent, whether it's personal, professional, or both?
I love the movie The Matrix. I think it's a great movie. And there's this one scene, I think it's in the final episode, where Trinity takes Neo up above the clouds. And in that moment, you see utopia. You see blue skies. You see what the world was like before the machines took over. But as they ascend, all of a sudden they descend and they're back into the Matrix. And to me, Black History Month is that one moment where they see the blue sky.
Hmm.
Because out of the 12 months of the year, we get 28 glorious days where we get to celebrate our heritage and our culture, and everyone takes notice.
Yep.
But as soon as March 1st hits, we are back underground and the work takes place below the surface. And quite frankly, I'm okay with that because that's where all the work is done. It's underground, it's below the surface, where we have to connect, find new platforms for us to build these relationships and continue to do the work for the 11 other months. So Black History is fantastic. It's a celebration. But for me, I'm Black
That's
365
right.
days.
Yep.
So I don't turn it on, I don't turn it off. I am who I am. And I think it's important for us to recognize this. For example, next month we celebrate International Women's.
Yep.
You know what? Women are women every single day. So how do we bake that into everything that we do on a daily basis? And that's where we need to get to. That's when we need to celebrate it on an ongoing basis. Celebrate it in the moment. Celebrate it, on the weekend. Celebrate it
Yeah.
with family and friends. It's acknowledging everything all the time. And not just dedicating a 28-day period for it. So I appreciate Black History Month, but I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of it in the other months that we don't celebrate it.
It's a great point. And I'm also a fan of celebration of these months because I think without it, we may just blend into the abyss. And so when you can celebrate it, you can talk about it and also talk about what still needs some attention, what have you. It's definitely a great thing. But thank you for sharing your perspective on it. Let's talk about ED&I, the topic of I don't know what lately. A lot of this guests this week and last week, or I asked this question too, but you specifically, I know you've been involved in it for your throughout your career, and you've seen some really impactful changes in the workplace. But we also still know we have to improve in other areas, and there's also a lot of, quite frankly, threats to it now, as it's, blamed for things and other things. But um, what is your thought on, some of the most impactful things you've seen and where do you feel like we all need to improve a bit more?
So it starts with the self, right?
Okay.
I think it's an individual act that we all have to recognize that we all play a role. And when I say that, I have to recognize that I'm privileged. I have to recognize that I am an ally. I have to recognize that I wear many hats when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as such, it's important that we understand that we're all connected. We really are all connected.
Hmm.
So the first thing is recognizing it within yourself. But there's three things that I believe are really important. The first one is I believe that this is the time to double down, really double down and continue to socialize and evangelize the value proposition of ED&I. There's organizations that are pulling out because of what's happening south of the border, but then there's
Yeah.
organizations that are making a very bold declaration that we will continue the work around diversity, equity, inclusion. And
Right.
here's a funny thing, which is my second point. There is sufficient data that proves that when you have diversity within your organization, your revenue is going to go up, your profit margins are going to go up, you're going to have an increase in customer loyalty and customer retention. So there is a business driver that is an imperative around the
Hmm.
value proposition around ED&I. It's undeniable. It's there. It's in stats. That's really important for organizations to look at it in terms of, yes, it's the right thing to do, but it's also contributing to our bottom line. But here's a third piece. There are some folks that believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to rob them of something. I heard this said by Wes Hall, and he said it really well. When you increase diversity, equity, inclusion, when you provide more opportunities for more people, you're not taking away anything from anyone. All you're doing is just making the pie bigger.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes it's important that we recognize this isn't about subtraction. This isn't about elimination. It's about inclusion, which makes it bigger. So the pie will still remain a pie, except we're expanding the pie by bringing more people into the conversation. And that to me was a turning point because often I talk to some folks and there's this concern, well, I'm going to lose a job, or my importance or relevance is going to go away. Absolutely not. What it means is that we're bringing more people into the conversation. We're going to have a richer discussion, and we're going to come up with a better product or a better service because we're adding all these different points of view. It's expansion, it's not deletion. So the first thing is, I think it's important at this particular inflection point in our society that companies double down. Why? Because we're seeing the revenue, we're seeing the numbers, we're seeing the increase in bottom line margins. And then the third piece is it's not about deletion, it's about addition. Simple math. More people, more diverse ideas, you get a better solution.
Such a great perspective and explanation. I'm really hoping the listeners grab a hold of that because it really drives it home. Thank you for sharing that. I agree. Thinking about some of our listeners, and some of them might be starting out in their career, or others, like I said earlier, are thinking about bold transitions, right? What advice do you have for those looking to break maybe into leadership roles, and especially for those from underrepresented backgrounds?
Yeah, great question, Brian. I would say there's a couple of things you can do. Number one is, um, at the US inauguration, there was one person that was noticeably absent, and that was Michelle Obama.
Mhm.
Michelle Obama did not attend, and people were questioning why she didn't attend, and there was all these sort of rumors and conspiracy theories. The reason why Michelle Obama didn't attend was she didn't believe in the person that was taking the reins. She didn't believe because she was disappointed that several of the diversity programs were being wiped out, with a single stroke of a pen. All the programs that they implemented to create a more equitable environment were vanishing. So the fundamental ideology and beliefs
Mm.
were not aligned with who she was. And I say that because oftentimes I talk to students and they're frustrated, and especially students that are new to the country, they're frustrated because they're not getting a response. And I look at the companies that they're applying for, and I tell them, it's very clear that this company does not encourage hiring of diverse talent.
Mhm.
So why knock on their door? They're not going to open. What you need to do is find organizations that value diversity. So, for example, I look for companies that support the Black North Pledge.
Right.
Why? Because they have a very defined mandate to hire Black talent. I look for organizations that support immigration policies. And some organizations, including my own, we have it on our career site that says if you are new to this country, here are some jobs that you can apply for. So do the work to find companies that are absolutely inclusive and target that really want to include and have programs specific to folks that are new to the country. So that's the first thing. Stop knocking on doors where you're
It's
not
good.
welcome because you're not going to open the door. And it's
Right.
creating frustration. Do your homework to find organizations that are investing in hiring young talent that are from Canada and new talent to the country. The second piece I would say is mentorship and or sponsorship. There
Hmm.
are three type of people that you should always have within your network. The first one is the person that you want to be. So if you want to be a leader in the next 3 to 5 years, find that person who's in that position today.
Yep.
Why? Because they're going to tell you about the pitfalls and the journey that you're about to embark on. And they're going to give you some incredible golden nuggets and words of wisdom that you can use to map out your career and be very intentional about how you plan there. So find someone that you aspire to be in 3 to 5 years, but find that person who's in that position now. The second person is someone who's in your role right now, because it's a tough journey. And there are days where you're going to need to talk to someone who understands precisely the journey and the path that you're on. Someone who understands the challenges, someone who understands what it's like to get a door slammed in your face, someone who understands when no one replies to your LinkedIn or your text messages, and you feel as though it's a rejection. Because you are going to need that person to offer support, share horror stories with, and find comfort. So that's really important that you find
Mhm.
someone who's exactly on the path that you're on. And by the way, you're not competing with that person. When the tide rises, all boats float. So you don't see them as competition. You
Yep.
see them as someone who's going to support you, give you that word of encouragement because they are in the trenches with you. And then the third person that you want to build in your network is someone who actually wants to be like you. And the reason why that person is important. So, for example, I have a couple of mentors that I'm working on. And I was at a conference the other day and it was really encouraging. Someone said, "What do you want to be in 5 years?" And they said, "I want to be Paul Hamilton." I'm like, oh. But the intent there is you want to find someone
Yeah,
who's going to aspire to be where you are because it keeps you humble. It reminds you of where you came from and it allows you to connect with them and bring them up. It's important that we don't leave anyone behind. So if there's someone that is embarking on a journey to get to where you are, help them because the person above is there to help you. So pay it forward and we don't leave anyone behind.
that was awesome. Thank you. Thinking about, let's talk a little bit about industries now. I know that comes up a lot, from tech to finance to healthcare. Adaptability played a role, obviously, in your success. What could professionals or others learn about navigating change within industries from your perspective?
I tell people there are two important skills that you need in today's day and age. Number one is adaptability, and number two is emotional intelligence. There was a point in time where IQ was the most important thing, right? If
Yep.
you were the smartest person in the room, you were going to be the leader. The reality is, according to the World Economic Forum, the number one most sought after skill for leaders today is EQ. It's the ability to show compassion. It's the ability to listen and understand. It's ability to meet people where they're at. Its ability to really cultivate a culture where people want to do and feel with psychological safety that they can deliver their best work. So EQ is a highly sought after skill that a lot of leaders just don't have in today's day and age, right? Because we weren't brought up in that sort of environment. It was always about command and control. But going back to your question, adaptability is so important. This world is changing at a rapid pace. So it's not about understanding a certain technology because it's about having the ability to learn, how to be agile, how to adapt to the changing environment. We are in a world now where it's all about AI. 6 months to a year, it might be something new. So it's important that you have the ability to learn. It's important that you have the ability to be agile. But what's more important is the ability to adjust, change management, ability to learn in a rapid succession. And it's not about learning everything. It's about learning what you need to get you to that next sort of point in your career. So adaptability is so vital in today's day and age. And some folks really get stuck in a certain position. You could learn anything, explore, be creative in terms of how you acquire information, network, build relationships with people that can help you learn, whether it's micro-credentialing or if it's just through mentorship. There's so many different facets and avenues to acquire new knowledge. It's important that you take advantage of that.
Absolutely. So this whole show is also about legacy. And as I think about legacies in motion, what are you thinking about your legacy? What do you want to leave someday behind?
You know, I often talk about this with my kids. You know, what will you tell your friends who your dad is? You know, and I think it always goes back to that wonderful quote from Angela Mayo, who says, People are going to forget what you did. People are going to forget your title. People are going to forget, your job and how much money you made. People will never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And I think that is, and I apologize, that wasn't the exact quote, but it's
Nope.
along those lines. But that's my legacy. My legacy will be around how I made you feel when you and I connected. I have so much admiration for the work that you are doing. And I value the contributions that you're making to the younger generation. But more importantly, I love when you and I just banter back and forth.
Yeah.
I love when you and I can sit down and talk about what's going on in your life and what's going on in mine, and we just have that connection. My legacy will be when you are with me, you are going to feel like you were the most important person because at that moment, you are the most important person. And if I can do something to help you in that moment, I will absolutely do that. So for me, it's not
Mhm.
about what I did. It's not about my title. It's not about, the places that I've traveled. It's about the people I've met, and more importantly, how I made them feel with every single engagement or interaction that I've had.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Paul. And thank you for sharing your journey and your incredible work you're doing shaping the future of town and leadership. And thank you for being a friend. It's great to call you that as well. So I really appreciate you joining me on this podcast for this, especially for this month and this topic. Lots of great content for people to listen to. So thank you so much for being a part of it.
Brian, I just want to say thank you for creating this safe place, this safe space for us to talk about our history, our culture. I've listened to several of your Legacy Black History Month podcasts, and they are exceptional. And as a individual from this community, I've learned so much because of the time that I spent listening to Coffee. Um, so keep doing what you're doing. You're
Thank
making a substantial difference. Keep going, my friend. I,
I
I, I truly, truly appreciate you.
Thank you. I'll take that and keep going. That's my kick in the pants today to keep doing it. So thank you for that. For our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your network. You can now find us on coffeewithconvery.com or your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on Instagram where we share more insights and more interesting content. So this is Coffee with Convery, where we show you your success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym. All right. Thank you so much, Paul, and great to have you.
Thanks, Brian.